Hello, and thank you once again. Yes, today we will now be looking at an important subject. Previously, we talked about the origin of the Quran, the origin of the Quran, and how it came about. Now we'll be focusing on the divine perfection as a textual claim, whether as a text of the Quran, just like we have the codex or a copy of the Quran today. Can it be said that it's perfectly there? It is perfect in the text itself. Everything about it is actually perfect. Why do we tend to scrutinize the Quran in that way? This is because of what the Quran did said. So we are just focusing what the Quran said to explain and to understand it from it within the Quran itself. For instance, chapter 4 of the Quran, verse 82 did say that should there have been any or if the Quran had come from other than Allah, they would have found within it contradictions. So that is the basis of our daily analysis about the Quran claims and so many things. Because the Quran claims to have no any contradiction, it is completely perfect, it is untouched, uncorrupt, and unchanged. In fact, the Muslims go far to say that the Quran is the only book that can be reliably established that it has not been changed, it has not been influenced by history for over 14 centuries. And that, in the other hand, the Bible has been changed, it has been corrupted. These are the claims of the Muslim Ummah on daily basis. However, we are looking at the divine perfection of the Quran as a text. Can we confirm that to be perfect? Can we confirm the holistic write-up of the whole Quran as a codex to be perfect? We read in Surah 41 verse 42 of the Quran, which did say, and I quote, falsehood cannot approach the Quran from behind it or from before it. It is a revelation from the wise, the praiseworthy one. End of quote. So from this, the Quran explicitly asserts its own absolute perfection within itself. It is perfect, falsehood cannot approach it, and therefore, whether from before or behind, it is completely a revelation from the most wise and the most praiseworthy being, which simply means, by this statement, it makes three categorical claims. That one, there can be no error at the origin of the Quran in any form because it was perfect. Falsehood could not have been have its own way in the Quran, and there couldn't have been any form of corrupting it in any form. That is one. The second point is the fact that no corruption in the form of transmission. So at the cost of even transmitting the Quran, maybe from Allah to Muhammad or from Muhammad down to the writers who copy it, because it is believed that Muhammad dictated the Quran just like Allah dictated to him. So he was also repeating it, and other scribes were copying it down in the writing materials. So at that process, according to this verse, there couldn't have been any corruption in the course of that transmission. You see? And then the third point is the fact that no contradiction across time, either in the past, present, or even in the future. So the Quran remains perfect according to this verse 42 of Surah 41, the divine perfection as a text. So in that case, it makes the Quran to be perfect. But don't take it as first value until we are able to go through other parts before we can now take that seriously. If in any form we find any contradiction or any spelling error or any cause of transmission, then we have a reason to discredit the claims made by the Quran and including the God of the Quran as well, because such has been promised never to have happened, and if we see any, it will now call our attention to question. So according to the Islamic's own criteria set by the Muslim teaching and standard, the Quran must therefore be internally flawless. There couldn't be any mistake in any form. So any contradiction is not a minor problem. It is a direct refutation of the divine authorship of the Quran. And that is why we always want to draw attention to our followers and our listeners to look at it critically. It matters because we're even trying to see why do some were even asking me in the comment section that why do you even bother yourself about the contradiction of the Quran, and why is it that important? I said yes, it's important because unlike in Christianity, where even if you see contradiction of any form, it is believed that it was a man work, human beings writing. So there could have been possibility to have a flaw, to have a spelling error, or have some kind of mistakes in the Bible. It's acceptable because nobody says that all and everything in the Bible was written by God directly. No, it is not so believe in the Bible. But it's rather we believe that all scriptures are inspired by God. Not all scriptures are written by God. So therefore, all that wrote the Bible are spokespersons of God, and therefore they could speak in some forms of their human nature. There are things that could happen. And for example, David is believed to be a prophet, a man after God's heart. Yet there are flaws about David. He committed adultery and he also committed murder. So we cannot say because David is said to be a man after God's heart, will then mean David is perfect, infallible. That is not the Bible teaching. The Bible teaching that everybody, regardless of who you are, if you commit a sin, God must punish you, and that you must be punished so that others will learn from their leaders and from the people who have been there before them. So, and that is why it's important to us to see if there are contradictions in the Quran. It is completely a different thing, because it will now make the Quran and its claim and its God to become liars. Why? Because a verse in Surah 4 verse 82 have told us that if the Quran had come from someone other than Allah, contradictions could have been found within it. So any contradiction would simply mean that the Quran didn't come from Allah. So it come from someone else, and therefore is crumbled. You see? That is the difference. Now, that is why it's important. Because it is not made to be that of Christians like believe. So Islam actually reject this model of the human nature, humanity, human influence, human inspiration, human writing, and the human author. Nothing like that in the Muslim world. The Quran is not inspired, it is rather dictated. Allah is believed to have spoken every word in it. The Quran is uncreated according to the Sunni Orthodox Muslims. There is no allowance for human mediation, reduction, or even development. Therefore, if the Quran contains contradiction, like I said earlier on, the problem cannot be attributed to scribes or prophets or even history. It can only rest entirely to and with Allah himself, because he is believed to be the speaker word for word of the Quran. And that is why a contradiction matters. That is why it's important for us to identify this, to explain this part by part, so that people understand it better in the course of time. Thank you very much until we meet in the next episode. Kindly subscribe, follow, share, and comment. And in fact, we would like you to talk to us if you have some kind of perspective or questions, so as to be able to attend and respond to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Until we hear from you again, until we meet again.